What is the most unexplained, supernatural, or paranormal event you've ever witnessed? I heard my 2-year-old daughter talking in her room in the middle of the night. I went in and asked her what she was doing. She said, talking to Samantha. She's on the ceiling. My wife had miscarried a few months prior. It was a girl. We were going to name her Samantha. Probably too late to get noticed, but it's a good story. I used to work as a 911 operator in a relatively large metro area. One night at about 3 a.m. or so I answered a call from an elderly lady who said she didn't feel good. I tried to get more info about what was wrong: chest pain, trouble breathing, headache, is she diabetic, etc. I got her address and phone number. She said no one else was home but the door was unlocked so they could go in. No matter what else I asked about what was wrong, all she would say is, "I don't feel good, can you please send someone to help me?" After a few minutes she said, "I'm gonna put the phone down for a minute, I need to go to the bathroom." I tried to get her to stay on the line with me, told her she can do whatever she needs to get ready but I'd like to be able to stay in contact in case there's a problem. She said, "I'm gonna put the phone down, I'll just be a minute." A couple min passed, then the fire department called on scene so I just disconnected and didn't think much about it. Told them the patient advised front door is unlocked and she was in the bathroom. A couple more min and then one of the firefighters called over the air with a weird tone and said, "Fire alarm," which is how they addressed dispatch. How exactly was this call received? I told them call was first party from the patient's home phone approximately 8 minutes ago. He didn't respond over the air, but called the desk from his cell phone, which usually only happens when something weird is going on that they don't want broadcasted since anyone can listen to the radios. On the phone he said, "Are you sure this wasn't a third-party call from a family member or something?" I said, "Negative." Caller advised, "I don't feel good," and said no one else was home, so to the best of my knowledge, the caller is the patient. Have you made contact? He said, "Yay, she was in the bathroom like you said, but she's been dead for about 12 hours. Cold to the touch, fully livid, full rigor, we're gonna need a deputy out here." Afterwards, we pulled the tapes of the radio and phone calls and checked the timestamps, address, phone number, and went over everything a few times to see if I missed something. I called them back in the morning after the shift to see if they had any more info, but they were just as weirded out as we were. The phone was in the living room and the patient was in the bathroom, but the call was definitely from that phone. Still have no idea what the most likely explanation is. My grandmother hates cats. Never would let one in her house. One night, she woke in her apartment and saw a black cat sitting on my grandfather's chest. She grabbed a nearby broom and chased the cat out of the bedroom, down the stairs, where it proceeded to run through the closed front door. Afterwards, when she returned to bed quite confused, she saw that my grandfather had died in his sleep from a heart attack. Forensics actually found paw prints on the carpet. Played Ouija with some friends and it started being threatening and satany, so we threw it away in a church dumpster. The next day the church was struck by lightning and burnt to the ground. My dad died in a house fire in 1991. I was home at the time, on the other side of the house from him. He was sleeping at the time. When I tried to wake him to get him out of the house by breaking a window and trying to jump into his room, I heard him say something but I don't know what. I never told anyone in the family that he woke up, and the firefighters/doctors or whoever, I really don't remember, said he never did wake up. He didn't die immediately, it was 3 days later, of smoke inhalation. A few days after he died, my sister told me she had a dream where he wanted her to let me know that he was telling me to get away from the house. I've still never told her he woke up. I'm late to this thread but reading some of these has compelled me to post. This isn't my story but my mom's. She is an extremely rational person, but this event caused her to have such severe panic attacks that she had to return and live with her parents for 6 months. All of this happened a few years before I was born. My mom's first husband was a Navy pilot during the Gulf War. The carrier was about 10 days into its cruise and operating with complete radio silence. She hadn't heard anything from the ship since it left but that was to be expected, this was a war. On that night about 10 days into the cruise my mom woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. She saw her husband standing in the room. It wasn't an ethereal form either, he appeared solid and utterly the same. The only thing different about him was that his head was shaved. He only had one thing to say, goodbye. This whole experience startled my mom and she couldn't get back to sleep. She went to the kitchen to get some water when the doorbell rang. All military wives know what the late-night doorbell means. Her husband had suffered a massive heart attack and died aboard the carrier. She was grief-ridden but reasoned that the apparition had been a hallucination born of the stress of having a spouse deployed. Besides, with his head shaved, he didn't even look that familiar. Her mother and mother-in-law flew out immediately to plan for the funeral and receive the body. She stayed strong until the first viewing of the body. Her lifeless husband was bald. In a letter from his NFO, the shaved head was explained as the result of a lost bet. There had been no way of knowing that his head had been shaved, and my mom suffered a minor mental break. My wife and I were getting dinner on the table. Our 4-year-old son was in the adjoining room, and said, "Hey, that's the job I had in my last life." He's looking at the TV, and there is a man shaping metal over a fire. We were shocked because we had never discussed reincarnation with him, or even with each other in his presence. We're atheists. I tried to get him to elaborate, but he just went back to what he was doing like he never said it. Oh, yeah. When they were toddlers, both of my kids told me about their previous selves. My daughter complained about how the elders used to make her cover up her entire body with long dark robes, but now people walk around almost naked and it's much better. My son told me that the last time, he was stuck under thick ice and couldn't get out, and then he died and came to me. Both times the kids immediately returned their attention to the mundane task at hand. I'm sure there's a logical explanation in the mystery that is the nonlinear toddler mind, but when they blurt stuff like that out, it can give you chills. During most of my life, my mother ran a daycare. One of the kids was named Dylan. Dylan was really smart and somewhat rebellious, but not a jerk kid. We all liked him, but he was always a bit off. So one day he's sitting at the kitchen table eating his snacks. The other kids were done and it was just him and my mom. He had some carrots left but was out of juice. My mom asked him if he wanted more. His response freaks us out today, almost 20 years later. Keep in mind, he was something like 7 when this happened. I was visiting and making a sandwich and this crap happened. "Well, miss, I'd prefer some whiskey if you wouldn't mind obliging me." "What? Whiskey? No." With a laugh. "Begging your pardon, miss, but it's been a long day. I've come a long way. I'm going to turn in soon and am not here to cause any trouble. I've heard you have whiskey and I'm more than happy to pay for it. I'm having a good week." This made no sense. This was a little kid. Our family certainly had no whiskey in the house. We were teetotalers. His parents rarely let him watch TV, let alone old-timey westerns. But here he was, accent and all, sounding like Jeff Bridges in True Grit. My mom, though, just reacted. "No, Dylan, no whiskey for you. Orange juice." She set down a sippy cup of the OJ goodness. "Ma'am, that's just not going to cut it. I came all the way down from Wyoming and by tarnation I'm a man who wants some whiskey. If you can't provide it, then I'll find someone who can." He stood up, made for the front door, and got it open before my mom grabbed him. Presto! He was back to normal. "Can I have some juice?" Nothing he did during this time was him. His body language was different, his voice was way lower, and he was totally into what he was doing. It happened a few times after that. At some point, later when I wasn't there, my mom asked him who he was. He gave a name that was something along the lines of Thomas Jeremy Armstrong. She got really into it and started asking about his life. He was apparently lumber prospector and trader who lived his later years somewhere north of Sacramento. We were in Washington state, and had a wife who died from a fever. This kid was in the 1st grade. My mom then asked when he was born and he said, December 14, 1856. It was a Sunday. Sure enough, it was a effing Sunday. This kind of stuff has always held a mild fascination for me, but this kid was something else. I have no idea how this works, but it's freaky to this day. I have a lot of stories, but I'll go with my favorite. My grandpa, who was a tough-as-nails World War II Marine vet, had a little stuffed bunny. He kept it out in the open, and when he would walk past it and thought no one was looking, he would pet it. Big old tough guy petting a little stuffed bunny in adorable secrecy. It was an ongoing family joke. Anyways, he committed suicide and we all went to the house to deal with the police and ME and everything. We stayed in the house that night and it had an overall creepy vibe because of what had happened. We were all naturally upset and struggling and doing dumb things to try to make ourselves laugh to try to deal with it. And we realized the bunny has been moving. Like it would be on the dining table, and then we would see it in the den an hour later. I thought someone was doing it as a joke. But everyone swore they wouldn't do that and we never caught anyone doing it. I kept an eye on that bunny the entire week. Never saw anyone touch it, but it would still be moved. I think Granddad was playing jokes on us. Not the most convincing or scary story, but I like it. His cell phone also called his landline. That was weird. Me and some of my buddies were smoking hash. Around 3 a.m. we decided to play Bloody Mary. 2 of my buddies and I went and nothing happened. Then Ali went in, said Bloody Mary 3 times and came back unscathed. While he was grinning about the fact that we're such fools to believe something would happen, his nose began to bleed. When he realized that, he got into semi-shock and just sat in one place, shivering like it was -30 degrees. The rest of us just went numb and sat there trying to contemplate what the F just happened. No one slept that night. Making toast late one night, facing the kitchen bench eating for a good 5 to 10 minutes, cleaned up and turned around and every single cupboard door and cutlery drawer were open. They were all closed when I went into the kitchen, and there was no way anyone could have snuck in and done it because I was home alone. I also didn't hear them open in the time I was there. Scared the crap out of me, so I froze, let it register for a few seconds, then calmly closed everything and went back to my room to hide until daylight. One of a few weird things to happen growing up. Another time, my brother kept having chronic nightmares for weeks to the point where he didn't want to sleep in his bed anymore. They were recurring dreams of an old woman who would always be shrouded in shadow and try get at my brother. One night I decided to sleep in that bed and had one of the freakiest dreams I've ever had. The woman my brother had been having nightmares about slid up through the gap between the wall and the bed and was trying to grab and pull me off the bed, woke up sweating and yelling. It was after this that my mother decided to look into it. The nightmares started a week or so after buying the mattress secondhand, and my mother found out that one of the previous owners was an old woman who had apparently died on the mattress. Safe to say we go the hell out of the house because that crap was way too spooky for my family. We should have burnt it. My girlfriend and I were visiting my sister who lived in a 200-year-old home in western Massachusetts that used to be a brothel. We were staying in her guest room, which recently had new carpet installed that was rather tall and stiff. This made it quite difficult to open and shut the door. I recall using my body weight to force it shut and needing to yank it open. As I'm trying to fall asleep, I hear something bump the door from the hallway. I assume this is my sister, her boyfriend, or their dog. A few minutes later I hear something at the door again, but this time the knob turns. I freeze as I see the knob slowly turn and the door begin to open until I see a shape resembling the silhouette of a young girl. The only child in the house is an infant. I immediately roll over onto my side, close my eyes, and attempt to convince myself that what I saw was the silhouette of the dog. I don't mention this to my girlfriend or my sister because I don't want to alarm anyone. Fast forward a few months. My girlfriend and I are returning to Western Massachusetts to attend my sister's wedding and we will be staying in the same room. On the plane my girlfriend says, "I have something I feel I should tell you about your sister's house." I immediately know where she's going with this. As it turns out, she was awake when the door opened but she got a better look than me. She described seeing a girl of about 5 or 6 wearing a Victorian-styled nightgown open the door and stare her in the eyes with a penetrating intensity, before my girlfriend looked away. I tell her my story and we decide to make sure we drink enough to pass out every night, so we won't be awake if we are visited. So much paranormal crap happened to me when I was a kid. One that has always stuck was when I was about 3 or 4 years old. Back then I used to randomly wake up in the middle of the night really often for no known reason. I was still sleeping in my parents' bed at the time, so I would just lay in bed and look around. I swear, every effing time I'd look at the doorway to the living room, I would see 2 really tall figures standing there. They looked like the old farm couple in that one painting. Except they had hollow eyes and they were thinner. They never really didn't do anything but stare back at me at first. One night was especially weird. I woke up as usual and saw them standing there in front of the doorway again. Only this time something felt a bit more off than usual. The ceiling fan was on high and the blades were going so fast that the entire fixture was moving back and forth. I look back at the figures and they have some really dark creepy grins on their faces. I got scared and buried myself in the blankets hoping they'd go away. Then all I heard was the ceiling fan spinning even faster. Somehow the beads at the end of the switches were tapping against the glass light cover furiously. I peeked up out of my covers and the two figures were right next to the bed standing right over me with their ugly smiles. I screamed bloody murder and the glass cover on the light came off and shattered on the ground. My dad jumped out of bed immediately and turned on the light to see what happened, but the two figures were gone already. I was crying hysterically and took my mom a long time to calm me down. So much other stuff went on while I lived there. That was the worst house I ever lived in. Hopefully this won't get buried. So almost 3 years ago I was on holiday with my family in Esso and staying at my childhood home. That place has always been creepy but nothing really scary had happened to me. My older brother was usually the victim. This night I wake up at around 2 or 3 a.m., needing to pee. I was very comfortable cuddling my Esso though, so I tried to just ignore it and fall back asleep. Like half an hour goes by and I don't feel sleepy anymore and seriously need the bathroom. So I sit up and peek around to find my slippers, and I almost peed myself when I saw this weird person lying in fetal position on the effing floor. Like, it was black, way darker than normal black, even though it was under this rectangle of light that came from the hallway. Then I proceeded to cry. I felt so scared all of a sudden, and it woke my so up, who then had to console me until daylight. The next day there was nothing on the floor but I was still extremely creeped out. Since then I have only slept there once, and only with the lights on. It's been over 2 years since I last stepped a foot in my childhood bedroom, and I'm not planning on doing so anytime soon. That's just one, but there's so many things happen there I don't like to spend much time there anymore. I was in a room that lost its color, and this was witnessed with another person. I always see these and love reading them, so I will contribute my unexplained experience. First off, I have quite a few. I'm a nurse who works night shift with a mostly geriatric population. One night, it was just me and my younger nursing assistant. She wanted to look something up on the computer, so she was sitting beside me at the desk. Suddenly I noticed a paper on the counter with colored lettering looking dim. As in the color wasn't strong. Like there was a haze in the air. I looked across the room and there was a sign, it's still hanging there as of today, that said pressure points in red, and again, the colors were muted. It was like my eyes were losing the ability to see color. There was a general grayness filling the space, not like a shape, just everything appeared muted and the colors were dim. I started to quietly freak out and worry that I had a brain tumor or multiple sclerosis. A multiple sclerosis symptom can be losing the ability to see color. I didn't say anything though because, well, I didn't want her to think I was crazy. Suddenly Tara, the nursing assistant, looked up and out to the hallway and said, "Do you notice that the hallway looks gray?" I was immediately relieved because that meant I wasn't suffering from some mysterious disorder, because she saw the grayness too. We watched this grayness that seemed to saturate not only the hallway but our entire surroundings. It then seemed to begin to concentrate in the hallway and near the ceiling, and we watched as it slowly disappeared. It moved to the left and then just left. Afterward, it was like someone turned on the lights and the colors were back to full saturation. Surprisingly, we didn't really freak out, but that's probably because as healthcare workers we are just conditioned not to. To this day I have zero explanation for what this was, and nothing like this has ever happened since then, nor have I ever heard of anyone experiencing something like this. I have heard of people seeing clouds or fog, but this wasn't like that. This was like being inside a fog that filled the entirety of our space. I have had other strange happenings but nothing this odd. The fact that my nursing assistant saw it reinforces the experience. I had no plans to say anything about it because, like I said, I thought I was being anxious and a hypochondriac, but obviously I wasn't. I would love to hear if anyone else has ever had something like this happen.